All right, welcome in. Today we're going to be talking about the one-page strategic plan. Specifically, this has been built and designed for event and equipment rental business owners. So if that's you, tune in. If that's not you, you're still going to learn a whole lot. So stick with me here. Part of the reason that I'm making this video today is because if you look at all the information that's in there, it can very quickly overwhelm anyone, even someone that's done this before. A couple things to know as it relates to developing a strategy or a strategic plan for your business is that it can take a lot of time. And in fact, sitting down and doing it all in one session might not just be difficult, it might not even be the best decision for you because some of these things are things you want to test and you're going to want to have conversations with people about. You're going to want to see, is this really what we're going to commit to? This should ideally take place over weeks, and sometimes it can even take place over months. So this is not something to rush into. This is going to help you not just set a good strategy over the next year, but at a minimum the next 5 years. And of course, we're going to be setting up things that might even last the duration of your business in its entirety. So stick with me here as we go through each of these line by line, what each of them is, why we have them, and what that can mean for your business and a practical application. If you're anything like me, strategy has oftentimes been very ambiguous. It's been mystifying. And a lot of business owners that I've worked with and that I've been friends with, they've had a concept of what strategy is, but they haven't always been able to really articulate it. A lot of business owners feel that it's the plans that we put in place on how to run the business. And certainly there's an element of that within strategy, but that is not in and of itself strategy. So I'm going to read out a definition here that I really tend to gravitate towards. And that's that strategy is the disciplined set of choices an organization makes about where it will compete, whom it will serve, how it will create distinctive value, what capabilities it must build, and what it will deliberately decline. It aligns people, resources, systems, and decisions around a coherent and cohesive approach for sustained success. Said a lot more simply, strategy is how we are getting to where we have chosen to go. Now, I like that at the very end there because that's in my own words, and it very clearly articulates in very simple terms what strategy is. And for me, that helps take all the big words and kind of boil it down into where are we going and how are we going to get there. That's ultimately what strategy is. What isn't strategy? Well, strategy is not simply a goal, a project list, budget, revenue number, a collection of good ideas, goals. Goals describe what the organization wants to accomplish. Strategy explains the choices and capabilities that will make those accomplishments possible. Good question to ask is where will we play as a business? Why will customers choose us? What will set us apart? What must we build? And what will we refuse to do? Now, one of the first things that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do a SWOT analysis. If you have heard about SWOT analysis in the past, you may have thought to yourself a couple of different things. What is it? Why does it matter? I've heard some companies use this. Doesn't seem like it's really all that helpful. And to be honest with you, I would actually agree with that sentiment. A lot of businesses that do this don't, in fact, make it to where this is something that is genuinely helpful for their business. And the reason for that is it takes very little to plan out things and to make observations. It takes a lot more as a business to do something with that information and then implement that into a strategic plan. So, what a SWOT analysis is and does is it allows us to take a look at the business and the environment in which it operates and helps us have an understanding of where our business sits within that context. When we lack that critical strategic context, anytime we're going to make a strategy on how to build and develop our business, we're going to be missing that. There is a way, like there is in anything, to pencil whip this exercise and to come up with, well, we're really great at this, we're really bad at that. These are things that everyone knows, right? Everyone knows this about our organization. Everyone knows what's happening within the industry. Everyone knows what the macro picture looks like across the country. Well, the fact is, yes, while some people know it, have we collected all of those observations and all that information and data into one place? And have we utilized that information to develop how we are going to act and react in conjunction with that information? And the answer is no. So that's why we do the SWOT analysis. Very briefly, a SWOT analysis is a strategic planning tool. It's used to evaluate the internal and external factors that may affect an organization's ability to achieve its goals. It identifies strengths and weaknesses within the organization, along with opportunities, threats, and trends in the surrounding market or environment. So, strengths are our internal capabilities. These are the resources or advantages that position the organization to successfully execute the plan and achieve its goals. Weaknesses are internal limitations, gaps, or disadvantages that make it more difficult for the organization to execute the plan successfully. Opportunities are favorable external conditions or possibilities the organization could take advantage of to meet or exceed the plan. Threats, these are external conditions, risks, or obstacles that could prevent the organization from successfully executing or achieving the plan. Last but not least, I've added trends. While it's not typically a part of a traditional SWOT analysis, I think that it provides some exterior information and context that can be really helpful and critical. Now, trends are emerging changes in the market, industry, customer behavior, could be technology, the economy, even the regulatory environment that may create future opportunities or threats. As you review each of these for your organization, there's going to be a few things that are going to help guide the way that you're going to answer these. Obviously, in these buckets, you only have 5 different things here. Just because there's 5 things doesn't mean that you need to stick with 5 things. But I'm also a firm believer in prioritization. What that means is just because something exists within the business or outside of the business, or it's a threat or a trend or any of these other things, doesn't mean that we need to write it down because we could write a fully exhaustive list and spend all day doing this. What we really want to do is identify the biggest strengths, the biggest weaknesses, the biggest opportunities, and so on. What that enables us to do is to have a firm understanding of the major things that are at play within our business. For each of these, I'm going to go through and describe some core questions that you can ask as you're trying to figure out how to answer these for your own business. I'm going to provide some examples of ways in which you could look at this. And then also, what our planning and response is on these. So, not just what are these things, but what is our reaction to them? Let's start here with the strengths of the organization. A core question to ask is, what do we currently possess or perform in especially well? An example of this could be capabilities that you have within the business, a certain type of expertise, reputation in the industry or in the market, relationships that you have as a business, systems that you have that maybe are proprietary or that operate particularly well. It could be your cash reserves or your cash position. It can even be your culture and how that sets you apart from other competitors. Your response to your strengths is that you want to be able to protect, use, and strengthen these as your business moves on into the future. Let's shift over to weaknesses. Weaknesses, a good core question for this is what inside your organization is limiting performance? Examples of this could be skill gaps, poor systems, capacity limits, weak margin, concentration risk. Now, our planning response to this is with our weaknesses, we want to fix, manage, or design around these. At points in time, we may find that there's a weakness in our organization. It's not necessarily something that we can fix or fully remove. So we might have to design around it. Opportunities to exceed plan. What external possibility could help us exceed the plan? An example of this could be underserved segments, partnerships, new channels, competitor gaps, even technology. These are items that we may want to prioritize and pursue. Threats to making the plan. A good core question to this is what external condition could prevent us from making the plan? Examples could include economic shifts, regulation, could be new competitors, labor shortages, supplier risks, and so on. These are items that we're going to want to prevent, mitigate, monitor, or prepare for. Now let's move on to lastly our trends to watch. A good core question for trends is what change is developing that could alter future assumptions. Examples could be buying behavior, automation, consolidation, demographics, customer expectations. Now, overall, there's a few things that you're going to want to do as you're evaluating what to put down on this document under your SWOT analysis. So you can consider this your quality check. You want to be very specific. You want to avoid broad entries such as competition or great people. You want to describe the condition and why it matters and the evidence supporting it. Separate the factors. Strengths and weaknesses are internal. while opportunities and threats are external. Trends are not automatically good or bad until their likely impact on the organization is considered. Next, you're going to want to prioritize. We discussed that a little bit earlier. You want to identify the few factors with the greatest potential effect on the plan. A long list without ranking is certainly less useful than a short list that leads to choices and actions. We want this to be action centered. We don't want this to be the most exhaustive list that you've ever put together. That brings me to my last point, which is convert to action. For each priority, you want to decide whether to use it, fix it, pursue it, mitigate it, or monitor it. At some point, you may assign an owner and a next step where action is required. Now, that's not necessary for all of these, but as we get into what the strategy is, these are items that may end up becoming a part of how we are going to achieve that strategy. So if we've identified a certain outcome 5 years into the future, there may be some weaknesses in the organization that we've listed that we actually have to tackle before we can get to that outcome. There may be threats that come from outside of the organization that we have to account for and mitigate so that way we can get to that outcome. And there also might be strengths and opportunities that we can build upon in order to reach that as well. So that's again how all this is tying together. So speaking of tying everything together, we have strategic diagnosis. Strategic diagnosis is a concise explanation of the most important challenge, opportunity, or reality the strategy must address based on the SWOT analysis. This is going to distill everything we've done up here all into something down here. So that way we can convert information into action. This matters because without a diagnosis, the organization may complete a SWOT analysis and then create a strategy that's disconnected from what it discovered. If you found that that is the case, you either didn't do the SWOT analysis correctly or you've developed a strategy that's disconnected with the reality of what your business is currently in and what it's facing. In this example, if you were to read all of these right here, the strategic diagnosis says demand and reputation support premium growth, but owner dependence, inconsistent inventory data, variable fulfillment systems, and an underdeveloped talent engine will cap scale unless the company builds repeatable operating and leadership systems. So, right then and there, we've identified some opportunities of things that we need to work on. We need to work on building a talent engine. We need to build repeatable operating and leadership systems. So if we have a 5-year plan for outcomes that we want to see within the business, these are some of the elements that we've identified in our SWOT analysis that are going to lead us to certain action steps within that strategy to realize the growth that we want to see in the business. This next part is what I call the sandbox. This is the area in which our business is operating. This is going to describe where we play. It's going to describe what we're not going to do as an organization and who we are actually going to ideally serve. So there's a lot of potential pitfalls as we go through this type of exercise. So let's dive in. Let's define what each of these things are and why we need to account for them as we are developing our strategy as a business. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the where we place section. This defines the boundaries of the market in which the organization has chosen to compete. It clarifies which customers, markets, inventory categories, and services the company will intentionally focus on. This matters because clear boundaries allow the company to concentrate money, time, talent, inventory, and attention where it has the greatest opportunity to succeed. And it also helps avoid a common pitfall where organizations too broadly pursue opportunities and risk great competitive environments, higher operating costs, and a dilution of their core capabilities. This is something I've seen in a lot of different businesses, some of them big businesses that have bitten off more than they can chew. They developed an idea that they were going to scale and become something that they otherwise weren't, and they got away from the people who made their company what it was. History is filled with all sorts of companies that have simply gotten away from what it is that they do best. And then they started fishing in ponds where they weren't the biggest fish or they weren't the best at what they were doing. It diluted their focus and their attention on their core products and services. And because of that, they weren't able to continue staying in business. So we want to be very careful about the opportunities that we take on. Now, that doesn't mean that every single time that we grow and expand and do things that are outside of what it is that we're currently doing, that it's bound to fail. We just have to be very intentional about it and understand the risk that we are employing. So if any of that identifies with you and your business and what it is that you're looking to do, understand that you're going to have to account for some of that risk. Now, the other part about where we play is that we don't want to dilute focus and attention, certainly not resources and time towards something else, unless that is exactly what we are trying to do. You'll see this a lot in a business, or a business owner will see a bright, shiny object and they will say, that looks really interesting. Let's go out. Let's pursue that. Let's explore it. And then what initially starts out as some interest becomes a long term investment. And maybe that's not where the company can and should be going. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. When we define what it is that we're looking for, that is really going to help us understand where to put our time and attention toward, which is especially true when we go over to what we won't do. What we won't do identifies the customer's markets, inventory, services, behaviors, opportunities, risks, and growth paths the organization will deliberately decline. No matter how tempting, these are simply not the right fit for our organization. This helps us not waste our time. I've been a part of a lot of organizations and I've coached a lot of organizations that really struggle with focus, and it's completely normal. What we want to do is we want to make that decision ahead of time on what we're going to spend our time doing. If something is outside of our strategic plan, we're really not going to pay as much attention to it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to completely ignore things that are outside of the plan, but it's really going to have to make an impact to shift where it is that we're going. This helps all of our leadership team and our ownership team to be able to focus intently on the strategy and the customers and the inventory at hand, rather than go and pursue every single opportunity and waste a whole lot of time. As we define both of these, where are we going to play and what are we not going to do? This is also going to help us fill out who our ideal client is. Now, you'll see this a lot as the ICP, or the ideal client profile. There is a ton of great resources out there. I encourage you to go out and read them. They can really help you to formulate exactly who and what your ideal client is. With that being said, I'm going to go through just a couple of things that I'd like you to look out for. So, brief description here for you. An ideal client profile is an evidence-based description of the real reachable customers the organization is best positioned to serve successfully and profitably. It matters because it focuses marketing messages, sales, inventory, and service decisions on customers most likely to value the company, buy profitably, and generate repeat or referral business. So, a good primary question to look at when you're trying to define this is, which real customers are most likely to value what we do best, fit how we operate, and create profitable, lasting relationships? So, characteristics that you could utilize to define this person or this business. An example for B2B customers is you want to maybe identify the organization type, its industry, the location, company size, annual revenue, or even, uh, the event or equipment budget, the frequency that they're going to need something, and who the decision maker is that you're going to be searching for within that organization. It could be the business owner, it could be a manager, could be someone on their sales team. For B2C customers, you want to identify the age or even maybe life stage that someone might be in, their location, perhaps their household income, event type, or the equipment that they're going to need, guest count, budget, relevant preferences, and so much more that you could look at. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. The best way that I would suggest is, first and foremost, this is not an imaginary dream customer. It's not literally everyone who can pay for your service, or even a fictional audience that the business wishes existed. Confirm the profile using actual profitability, booking rates, repeat revenue, referrals, payment history, customer interviews, and operational experience. Start by naming real customers in your operation that typify your ideal client. Now, what this means is this: there are clients that we just love serving. Take that client and typify that client. When you typify that client into an ideal client profile, that will allow you to develop a strategy on how to attract more and more of that type of client. There are clients that we don't like, the people that complain, the people that don't pay, the ones that rent infrequently or call us last minute. And it's very easy for us as a business to just take all the business that comes our way. And by no means does an ideal client profile mean that we should be rejecting business that doesn't align with our ICP. If anything, what it does is it helps us to determine who they are so we can better find them, attract them to the business, and solve their needs. So when we have someone that's in our business that isn't necessarily that ideal client and they maybe aren't fully satisfied, well, maybe they're not fully satisfied because our business is not set up for that person. A lot of times companies will reinvent themselves based on complaints. And the reality is, maybe that's not your ideal client. Maybe those types of clients are only 10% of your revenue. And you don't really want to spend a lot of your time pleasing that 10% of clients because they're not really the biggest portion of your revenue. If you're going to make any fixes in your organization, it's going to be from the customers that give you the most amount of money and are the easiest to manage and the most fun to work with. So in this sense, the ICP also allows us to prioritize who has more of a voice in how we develop our business. The other part to this, as you're looking at it, is this also has to be real. These have to be grounded in real people that exist in your market. These can't be dreams or wishes. They actually have to exist because the way that this translates is you're going to take this information and you're going to utilize it to both build your business and build how you're going to market to those clients. With that being said, there's only so many spaces in here and there's only really space for one. I would start out with which is the top ideal client profile and go with that. Down the road, perhaps that's going to expand into a few other profiles. But for now, who is that number one ideal client profile for your business? Okay, so our next section is all about market advantage. A market advantage is a relevant, credible, and difficult to copy reason customers prefer the organization over available alternatives. When it comes to strategy, this is one of the biggest things that we can develop within a business. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to occupy shelf space in the mind of our ideal clients and have them have a firm understanding of what we uniquely and differently bring to the table versus our competitors. The market advantage is all about defining that because a market advantage is not simply just anything that we can think of or something that we think is cool that maybe our customers don't think is very cool. The customers have to genuinely value this. The organization has to also be able to consistently deliver it, and the claim must be supported by evidence. Competitors shouldn't be able to easily match this, otherwise it's not a true market advantage, and it's going to contribute to building a profitable business model. In a sense, when we do something that no one else does, people are going to come to us and they're not going to go to another business. Now, the four elements of this are as follows. We got a brand promise, a guarantee, a unique selling point, and an X factor. One thing to note about all of these is that we don't necessarily need all four of them. And in fact, many very successful companies have just one. So what I don't want you to do is think, well, I have to come up with all of these things. It could be, in fact, that you come up with one and it's completely sufficient, or it might even be two. So one thing I would suggest is if you don't have any one of these things, start by building one. If after you build one, you're able to add in another, add in another. Once you get to two and you're able to execute on that well, and you feel like your market is still looking for more and there's still ways that you can differentiate yourself as a business, add in a third. Now, this list doesn't need to go on and on and on. What it really should do is get to a point in your business where you are just completely separate and different in the mind of your customer in a way that your competition either cannot or cannot easily replicate. Ultimately, what all four of these are going to ask is, why will our chosen customers prefer us over our competition? So again, this ideal client, why are they going to choose our business? Well, they're going to choose our business in part because we are different. Now, picture this. If I have three choices between three event rental companies and they all have the exact same inventory and roughly the same pricing, who do I go with? If all of you look the same and none of you are different, how do I make my decision? Well, ultimately, my decision is purely chance. It might be the last person I talk to or the next one that calls me. If one of these says, we guarantee that your inventory is going to be there on time, Well, that's really intriguing to me. I'm going to be more inclined to go with that company. And if one of them also says, we have the most experience in this market out of anyone else. So we're going to set it up and we're going to set it up safely in a way that our competitors don't often do. So if you're going to have people under this tent or children bouncing in this bounce house, well, we're going to set this up in a safe way that's up to code and it's fully compliant and we're also fully insured. That's something that not everyone in this market does. Now, these are some pretty basic examples, and we don't necessarily want to just be incredibly basic, but that's to show you what it can look like to start to differentiate yourself from other businesses in your market. Briefly, the brand promise sets the value or experience customers can consistently expect. What can I count on every time I rent from you? The guarantee reduces risk by defining what happens when a commitment is missed. It asks, what happens if this doesn't work? The unique selling proposition creates preference through a relevant and provable distinction. Or in a sense, why should I choose you? The X factor makes the experience memorable, talkable, and referral inspiring. What makes this experience truly remarkable? Now, the brand promise is a clear commitment an organization makes about the value or experience customers can consistently expect when they do business with them. Brand promise establishes the expectation, while the guarantee will often explain what happens if that defined expectation isn't met. When you're defining a brand promise, you want to address a meaningful concern, establish clear conditions, and cover something that the company can influence and provide a meaningful remedy. In other words, this must clearly address a real pain point your client experiences. Brand promises like we're really trustworthy or we're really honest or we do business the right way, those are very generic sounding brand promises that a lot of businesses make. This brand promise needs to be a little bit more in depth and it needs to address a real pain point that your customer is having. We want this to stand out. Again, any market advantage, we are trying to get into the mind of our customer. We're trying to occupy mental space in the mind of our customers. We want to stand out, and we want to stand out for the right reasons, not the wrong ones, of course. Now, in this brand promise, what we have is this: design-led inventory confirmed accurately, damage-free, and delivered complete and on time with proactive communication from quote to pickup. That is quite the brand promise. If you have been in this industry long enough, whether you're on the event or equipment rental side, you know how difficult of a promise this is to make. So if you were to make this promise, this would be a pretty darn good promise that your competitors are not easily able to replicate. So I should also mention, as it relates to market advantage, this is not designed to be easy. This is not designed to be just something that we put up on a marketing banner and call it a day. This is something we build our business around. If we're going to make the claim that we have design-led inventory, so that inventory has got to be very trendy, and then it also has to show up accurately with what it is that was ordered. It's also going to have to show up damage-free. Well, that's really tough to do. And we want to have proactive communication from quote to pickup. How many times are people reaching out to us because we have not given them an update on the status of their order or some other piece of information that they're needing? So this is what we're talking about as it relates to brand promise. This isn't just a guarantee that, there's going to be a smile on someone's face. This is a promise that we're going to get the things that you care about right. Now let's jump over to the guarantee, because oftentimes the guarantee and the promise for me go hand in hand. I'd like to say we make the promise and then the guarantee is what happens afterward. Because ultimately, if we've made that promise, what's stopping us from, when we don't fulfill that promise, from just saying, well, that's totally our bad. We're really sorry. Come work with us again. The guarantee says, no, 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 no. I owe you something now. You get something back because I dropped the ball. That is what turns this from a commitment into a promise. If you say we're committed to doing these things that are listed out here, well, that's nice. But anyone can be committed to that. Everyone can actually do it. A promise is something that you fulfill, not something that you just really try hard to do. And the guarantee says, if I don't fulfill that promise, I'm going to do something. So if a confirmed item is missing or incorrect, we'll provide the fastest available replacement or approved alternative and credit twice the amount of the effective item. Now that is a guarantee. That's something that's going to lodge in someone's mind. Now the guarantee, it's a clear commitment. It describes what the organization will do if a defined promise, standard, or outcome is not met. This reduces customer risk and demonstrates confidence. So if I go to a business and they say, we're going to make this promise, and I guarantee that you're going to be 100% pleased with this, that we are going to fulfill our obligation. Otherwise, you are going to get not just your money back, I'm going to credit twice the item. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Brendan, why am I going to guarantee something on a promise if I'm going to lose money? Again, we go back to the fact that this is not designed to be easy. We're making claims that no one else is willing to make because they can't build a sustainable business off of it. We have to build a system around whatever that claim is, so that way we don't ever have to follow up on that guarantee. So one of your KPIs on this is going to be, how many times did we actually enforce the guarantee? And if it's below a certain percentage, we know that this is not profitable. So the idea is this: we're going to win more business by making this promise and by setting up this guarantee than we will lose by enforcing the guarantee for the brand promise. The goal is to make more money and to find more of these ideal clients who are very impressed with this promise and this guarantee. So that way we get more business, our business goes up. Now, as we're doing that, eventually, because we're human beings, we're going to drop the ball. When we drop the ball, we enforce the guarantee proactively. We don't wait for them to come to us. We say, hey, that was our bad. We messed up. We're going to make it up to you. We're going to enforce this guarantee. And then boom, we're going to sit again on this brand promise and say, we're committed to doing the things that we said we were going to do. That's what makes this so incredibly powerful. That's what makes this not just words on a marketing slogan or campaign, and not something that we just put on our website. When your sales team starts to sell like this, and they're selling something that your customers actually identify with, then they're going to book at a higher clip. You're going to make more profit because of this market advantage. Also, when you do this and you do it in a way that no one else can replicate it, you can charge more for it. So your profit should also increase at the same time. And then the more profit you have, the more you can build behind these promises, so that way you can actually fulfill these systems. All right. We're going to move on to the unique selling proposition. The unique selling proposition, or USP, is the clearest and most compelling reason a particular customer should choose the organization instead of a competitor or alternative. This can be a competitive edge achieved by the business that allows it to operate unlike any other competitor. So a USP connects a customer need to a distinctive and provable advantage. This could be experience, inventory, team. It could even be longevity. Longevity only becomes a USP when it's translated into a meaningful customer benefit. So because we have the longest tenured team, or we have the most years of experience doing something, we have outcomes that are better than our competition. So because we have the most experienced team setting up tents, we can actually construct any tent that you want in 20% less time than our competitors. Now, again, if you're going to make those claims, you also have to be able to back it up with some sort of data. One of my favorite USPs comes from a story of a call center. Now, if you know anything about call centers, and this isn't going to come as a shock to anyone that doesn't, call centers have incredibly high turnover. What a company figured out is that they could improve their culture in a very specific way, which they did. Because of that, they were able to retain their employees for something like 5 to 10 times the industry average. So when their retention dramatically increased and their turnover dramatically decreased, what do you think the quality of their average employee did? Well, the quality shot up. They also doubled down by investing in the training for their employees. So what you had was employees in this call center who had far better outcomes than anyone else in the industry. They took that unique selling proposition, which was very hard to replicate because no one else in the industry could do what they were doing, because they couldn't replicate the same culture and the same training and onboarding and retention that this business had created. And they were able to only work with their ideal clients. So they actually fired some of their clients that they didn't have as good profit margins on. They fired some of their clients that had more complaints, or that maybe didn't line up with the complexity of what it is that they were looking to train on. They focused only on the customers that they made the most amount of money on and that were the happiest with the results that they were getting. And they dramatically increased the profit of the business. And whenever their sales team interviews another client, what do you think they're telling them? They're telling them that we have a market advantage that no one else can do. And because of that, we can get you outcomes that no one else can get you. So if you're looking for this exact type of call center, who is the clear and obvious choice? Well, this company. And because they're the clear and obvious choice, they can charge a little bit more than the rest of the competition because they get better outcomes. And people, more often than not, they will pay more for better outcomes. All right, let's move on to the very last one, the X factor. Now, the X factor is an often unexpected, memorable, or remarkable part of a customer experience that makes the organization worth discussing, sharing, and referring. Now, there's an excellent example that comes from a book by Will Guidara. I hope I'm not butchering that, called Unreasonable Hospitality. So, what he did is this. He had, I believe it was some sort of ice cream cart, and everything about this business and this business model was designed to be exactly what you would expect in any business. They wanted to cut down on their costs. They wanted to maximize the level in which people enjoy their product, all these other things. But they did something a little bit extra that just didn't make sense on paper. They got a specific type of, I'm pretty sure it was a spoon that was very ornate and very interesting. And it really helped separate them from everyone else that was doing exactly the same thing. Now, the value itself was nothing greater as far as the end product. Their ice cream was about as good as anyone else's ice cream. The spoon made it something that people wanted to seek out and experience. So people were posting it on social media. They were telling their friends about it. This became something that was just unique and different and interesting. And also because they were the first ones to do it, their competitors, even if they had decided to do the same thing, they were just people copying what the original people did. So in that sense, they would be fakes when the original company is kind of the real deal. So they created something that was very momentous. They created something that was picture worthy, something that you could put on social media. The X factor is something that you're going to put on social media. It's referral inspiring. It may not always serve an obvious strategic purpose for the business, but it's going to inspire positive action by the customer. So there's a certain amount of risk that comes with this. You may decide to overinvest in a spoon that people just don't say anything about, and it kind of falls flat. There's a certain amount of testing that's going to have to happen, but ultimately, you may find that it really does connect with people. So a pretty basic example that I put in here is every wedding that we deliver, the couple receives a custom one-of-a-kind gift and signed card for our team. Do you think that that type of thing could make it onto social media? Do you think that if you have a wedding coordinator who has partnered with you, that they want to partner with a business that takes care of our shared end client? So often we, on the event rental space, if we're working with a coordinator, we think that the coordinator is the end client. That is not the case. The end client is the end client. It's whoever has hired that coordinator. So if we can impress the end client and impress upon them how good of a job that we've done, that makes our client look 10 times better. What does our client want to look like? They want to look like they're the best investment that this person has made, because then they get to grow their business. So when we do things in our business that make our clients look better and feel better and are better, we get something out of it. Now, what we don't want to do is something super simple like a gift card. We want to provide something that people are actually going to want to take a picture of and share with people, because then they're going to say, who's this company? Who's this business? How can we get a coordinator that's going to work with them? So now that we have an idea of our SWOT analysis, our market advantage, and our sandbox, we're going to look at a couple other items here that are designed to further orient our company towards long-term success. Now, one of my biggest grievances when we look at things like a purpose or a vision or some of these other things is that for a while they were incredibly overdone. They showed up on day one of orientation for a lot of businesses, and they absolutely disappeared once you got into that business. I like to say culture is what you find in the halls, not what you experienced on day one of working with a business. So this is a critique of every single business that's out there. None of these tools, none of these systems are going to work if we implement them one day and then forget about them another day. Anything that you're going to build in business that's worth building and that goes somewhere, it's because there was consistency behind it. When we talk about the next series of items here, this is going to help set a theme throughout our entire organization on how we're going to operate, who we are, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. No matter what the strategy is within our business, a part of our strategy is also going to be the way that we operate, because the way that we operate can be just as effective of a strategy as anything else out there. So let's dive in here. We're going to be talking initially about let's call it beliefs. Now, if you look at both of these squares here, we have just cause and purpose, or big, hairy, audacious goals, or the BHAG, and our vision. Now, depending on the type of organization you are, you may decide to go with one or the other. Well, you certainly don't want both. There's enough of overlap that you only really need one. We don't want to overcomplicate this process. And I try to give my clients the opportunity to pick one that they feel more closely aligns with the type of organization that they are. So let's dig in. Let's start with purpose. Purpose is the enduring reason the organization exists beyond simply generating revenue or profit. It explains why the work matters, whom the organization serves, and what meaningful contribution it makes through everyday operations. So I've seen this happen in businesses where an owner will say, our goal is to make money, or our goal is to double revenue. Our goal is something that, let's face it, just does not identify with the core of the human experience. The core of our human experience is not fulfilled by making money and pursuing money. It's made through other things that are oftentimes more relational and things of that nature. Without going into a ton of context in it, this can really connect and bond together an organization. The same with purpose or just cause. We want to establish this because this is the type of thing that will help us bring in people that believe the same things that we believe as an organization, and they're more likely to do a great work in what we're trying to accomplish. It's going to help with decision making. It's going to help us define the opportunities that we're going to pursue and the ways in which we are going to pursue them. It's going to help our team feel more connected towards something and have more of a reason of, why am I showing up and providing work for this business? Because it's a question that all of us are asking, even if we have not articulated that exact question. Now, should I choose purpose versus just cause? Well, if you choose purpose, you do that because your organization prefers a practical present tense explanation of why it exists. A great question is, why do we exist and why does our work matter? In this case, it could be to create a world where the people who bring meaningful gatherings to life experience the same belonging, celebration, and human connection that they create for others. Now, an example of this is we make ambitious events feel effortless by pairing design-forward inventory with disciplined execution and genuinely caring service. When you hire someone, you could say, well, this is what we're trying to curate. This is what our organization is trying to do. We want to be ambitious. We want it to be so clean cut that it looks effortless. And we want our inventory to be design forward, not something that looks like it's, out of a magazine from the 90s. We want it to be something that's new and fresh. It also should have disciplined execution, but let's not forget that we want to have genuinely caring service. Now, if your team were to embody this purpose, do you think your organization would be better? Do you think if you came to someone that wasn't following this and you reminded them that our purpose as a team is to do this, that you would have something to fall back on that was meaningful and specific? Absolutely. So that's part of why the purpose can be incredibly effective. Let's jump over to the just cause. The just cause is a compelling vision of a better future that does not yet fully exist, but that people are willing to work toward and make sacrifice to advance. It must be positive, optimistic, inclusive, service-oriented, resilient through change, idealistic, and never completely finished. Just Cause came from an incredible book by Simon Sinek. Would greatly recommend that you read any and all of his books. Really fascinating and interesting stuff. And I think it's a great replacement for the purpose. It just depends on the organization. Now, the best fit for choosing this would be when the organization prefers an aspirational description of a better future that it wants to advance. So in this case, to create a world where the people who bring meaningful gatherings to life experience the same belonging, celebration, and human connection they create for others. So notice how the just cause is a little bit more internally focused in this case, and the purpose is a little bit more externally focused. So just a couple of nuances between the two, but if we look at both of these are just honestly very aspirational and inspirational. If we actually committed to doing either or both of these within our organization, think of how that would land with our team. All right, let's move on here to big, hairy, audacious goals and vision. Vision describes the significant future the organization intends to create or become. It provides an inspiring and understandable picture of the destination and is normally a lot more qualitative than a BHAG. So you're going to want to choose this when your organization prefers a qualitative picture of its desired future. In this case, to become the Pacific Northwest's most trusted design-led event rental company, known for making complex, high-stakes events feel effortless. This vision helps to describe where the business is going. If I need to know why am I showing up to work, it's to help create a business that fulfills the vision. So the BHAG comes from a book by James Collins called Built to Last. Very fascinating read if you get a chance to read it. Essentially, the BHAG is a clear, bold, and measurable long-range achievement that would represent extraordinary progress. It's generally going to look 10 to 25 years in the future and remains connected to the organization's economics, capabilities, and strategic fundamentals. You're going to want to choose a BHAG when the organization prefers a bold, measurable, and time-bound finish line. In this case, by 2045, we're going to become the Pacific Northwest's most trusted premium event rental partner, recognized for 25,000 remarkable events and a 99% on-time record. Very specific, very measurable, and it's incredibly bold. Any company that can do 25,000 events in a 10, 15, 20-year span, I mean, that's an absolutely incredible feat there. And when your team shows up to work, if they know that you have a very specific goal that you're really pushing and stretching that organization to pursue, that's why we wake up every single morning. That's why we go into work. That is what we are building. I'm not kidding when I say that in every organization I've ever been in, people ask themselves the question, why am I here and what am I doing? Everyone knows that they're there to make money and to get a paycheck on payday. It's not a secret, but we as human beings desire and crave more. We are emotional, social, spiritual beings that want more drawn out of us. We have so much more potential than just our ability to do X work for Y outcome. We want it to be a lot more personable and effective. And that's what's going to lead us into our core values. Now, core values, I'm really excited by this section of it because our core values are going to be one of those things that actually helps us hire better, retain better, make decisions better. Everything in our organization, if it's funneled through core values that actually make a difference and that are structured in the way that they're supposed to be, can really make a strong difference in our organization. Now, briefly, let me tell you what core values have been and why many of those core values have failed. You'll notice that there's a lot of great companies out there that have done some extraordinarily unethical things, and inevitably, all of those businesses had core values. They just didn't follow them. So don't let the bad taste in our mouths of bad companies that have done bad things that happen to profess that they were trying to do good things ruin it for everyone else. Core values can be a very strategic focus for your business in its growth. And notice I say can, because just because it can work doesn't mean that it will work. Again, with everything that's happening from a strategic standpoint in the business, if we don't have consistency in enforcing them and in monitoring them and weaving them into every single part of the fabric of our business, we are going to fail. We are going to drop the ball. And these values are just going to become things that people see on a corporate letterhead that don't actually get mentioned beyond day one. We want to avoid that. So core values, what are they? Well, they are the principles and behavioral standards that define how people within the organization are expected to think, decide, behave, and work together. It matters because these strong values will guide hiring, onboarding, evaluation, promotion, retention, customer relationships, and difficult decisions. They should describe observable behavior rather than admirable but generic ideas. A note here on generic ideas. One of my least favorite ways of doing this activity is by saying, well, we're really interested in honesty. Honesty is such a good thing, and we want everyone in the organization to be honest. Well, instead of honesty, what about tell the truth early? Raise risks, mistakes, and hard facts before they grow. Now, this is the core value in action, and that's really what we want to try to do. And we're also setting the lexicon or terminology for what this looks like. If we can take our values and enter them into the lexicon of the business and what people are saying, that's a ginormous way. We want this to be something that people actually talk about. We want this to be relatable. It shouldn't be heady and academic. It should be something that is said simply and is something that we're able to utilize to inspire, and motivate action. When we hire someone, we're going to hire them in part through the lens of how do they align with our core values? What does this mean to them? Are they someone that's going to take this seriously? Are members of our management team going to utilize this to evaluate people and to coach people to make them better? And the answer absolutely has to be yes. The other pitfall that I often see with this is we're going to come up with 14 core values. Well, we can't keep 14 core values in the front of our minds. It's going to be really difficult for us to go out and experience 14 core values and try to do a really good job on all of those. So like everything else, we want to prioritize what are the core values that we can guide people to that are going to have the most dramatic and profound effect across not just the organization, but each member of that organization individually. And more often than not, it really should touch every single person. This can't be something that is also clearly self-centered in the organization and the business. Sometimes you'll see something from a business where it'll say we're protecting some element of profit or revenue, or you'll see something that says respect, like we don't backtalk people. Those were obviously created in reaction by owners that had bad experiences with employees. And in turn, they're trying to weaponize those core values against people. We're really not trying to do that. This is something that even the owner is held liable to. And it shouldn't necessarily be just about profit or business growth or some of these other things. So we want to be very careful not to do something that's incredibly self-centered as it relates to our core values. All right, the last element of this section is what makes this possible for our people, what we commit to creating for our employees. So I'm going to tell you something that's not going to come across as a shock to us. We're going to set a strategy for the business. Someone has to execute on that strategy. The majority of that execution is not going to happen by the business owner. It's going to happen by people that the business owner has paid to help execute that strategy. That makes it incredibly difficult. I can sit here and I can guarantee you a certain amount of work or outcomes based upon what I can do. But as soon as I start adding other people in that I have to be accountable for, we start to get into really complex things. And so I have to be able to articulate that strategy, communicate it well, hold my team accountable, and actually push people towards what it is that we're doing. Now, the question that each and every person is going to ask themselves is, what's in it for me? And as a business owner, we can't look at them and say, well, that's a really selfish thing to say or do. Because the fact is, we're saying the same thing. We want you to do this thing because we've asked you to do this thing. All they're asking is, why? And what do I get out of it? So this section explains what employees can gain, become, and help create by successfully executing the organization's strategy. It represents the organization's commitment to its people. It may include meaningful work, professional development, compensation opportunity, advancement, recognition, stability, belonging, work-life sustainability, and even pride in the organization. Now, one of the things that I hear from a lot of business owners is this: my people are always asking me for things. I'm trying to do what I can to develop a great culture. I launched this initiative, which is designed to show appreciation, and my team just isn't liking what I've done. I would love to offer more opportunity, but I can't offer more opportunity. Business owners can feel very stuck because their team consistently wants more from them, but they don't feel like they have anything really to offer. So here's what I will say to this. By filling out this section, you're going to put in place a plan and a commitment to what it is that you can and will provide. Often where the stress and anxiety comes from when business owners receive a lot of feedback on what a lot of people want is they feel an obligation to give everyone everything that they're asking for, and they feel bad if they can't do it. So I'll bring you into a brief picture into what I've done in the past. I can't guarantee that I can promote someone into a role. What I can guarantee is that if you're serious about trying to get into a higher role within our organization, I will help mentor you and develop you. So that way, if something were to come up, you would be in a place where you can do that. And maybe we can't do it, but maybe you do find another organization that's willing to hire you into another position that we can't provide you. So that's a very selfless way of looking at it, which a lot of businesses might be tempted to say no to because it's not necessarily advantageous to them on the surface. But if we dig deep a little bit below, What I have found is the opposite, and that's this. When I have offered to help people with things like this, it actually increases their loyalty to the organization rather than inspires and motivates them to take the things that I've taught them and to go elsewhere and find another job. Maybe that'll placate a little bit of your concern with this, but ultimately, instead of doing everything that everyone asks of us or feeling bad when we can't, we're going to define what are the things that we are actually committing to. And when we create pathways or opportunities for what we're actually committing to, we are going to do one of two things. We are going to avoid the questions on, well, why aren't you doing all these other things? Which will be easily answered by, well, because we're doing these things. And then second is, we can lean in on the things that we're actually trying to do and trying to commit to, and we can do those things really well. We can put them on some sort of rhythm. We can build a process around how we're going to establish those things. So let's look at number 3 here. We're going to have published career paths, pay bands, and quarterly development conversations. I'm sure all of you have had the conversation with many people before. Well, I'm looking for a pay raise. I'd like to make X amount of money. Well, if you just publish the pay band on what you're willing to pay every single role, you have clear transparency on what that role is valued at within the organization. If someone wants to get paid more, well, you have a development path on how they can get to another position that has a higher pay band. You're not guaranteeing that they will be able to get that job, or if that job were to open up, that they would have that. What you're doing is you're describing, here's that path, here's what these positions pay. And if you'd like to get paid more, then we're talking about your growth and development. So when we define these things and we pave the way for these things, instead of us reacting to all the questions we're getting, we are being proactive by saying, this is the system, this is how it's set out. Even when someone interviews with us, we can show them, this is what it looks like to grow with our business. Here's the system that we have in place. We're investing in you. We want to see you succeed. If someone wants to develop, here are the things that we can do to help develop them. Or how about this? Profit linked to recognition and bonuses when company and team goals are achieved. I would love to know what happens when the business has a success. What does that mean for me? What's in it for me? And I've seen this happen with a lot of businesses where they will say, if we reach a certain goal, sure, maybe management has a structured bonus, but even your hourly employees oftentimes might get a one-time bonus depending upon the success at the end of the calendar year. When you create these systems and you build these for your team and you commit to them, you're going to find that you have fewer frustrations, fewer complaints, because you've actually designed a system. And these things should reinforce your overall strategy. If you say to your team, here are the 5 things that I'm committed to investing in order to help you, provide for you, take care of you, and help you feel like this is a stable and wonderful organization for you to invest in, well, then my ask is also that you invest in these strategies, that you invest in pursuing these things within the organization so we can grow this thing. And as we grow it, we can also make possible more than just what's written here. Now we are getting to the end of our one-page strategic plan. We have 3 things left, and this is where our strategy execution comes into play here. So we're going to take all the information that we've worked on thus far, and we're going to start to distill this into some strategic outcomes, some strategic pillars, and some key performance indicators. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but it is absolutely worth repeating, and it's this. This is not necessarily something that you sit down and you complete all at once. It's going to take a little bit of time to come up with these. You might put an initial draft down. You might come back. You might switch some things around. Even as you're starting to build out the strategy, you may realize that there's an element from earlier on in the process that you need to come back and you need to slightly tweak. Strategy is not linear. And so while I brought you through this in a very specific way, you might look at this and decide to jump around a little bit. You might look at this and say, I have no idea what I want to happen in 5 years. Maybe I actually have key performance indicators that I'm really interested in that I think are really important before I even have a strategic outcome. And maybe that's not the right order, but maybe that's just what's coming to my mind. Get the information down. Don't be worried about making this perfect. Because with everything and really anything that we do, we don't want to reach perfection before we've gotten to execution. Because if the focus is perfection, we're never going to get there. We want to be able to feel comfortable executing stuff, even when we don't have 100% confidence in it, because in part, that execution will help refine the goals, the outcomes, and everything else that we're moving toward. 5-year strategic outcomes. So I say 5 years, it could be 3 years. It even could be 10 years. It doesn't necessarily have to be any one of these things. I think 5 is a really good middle ground. It's far enough out to where it actually causes us to stretch a little bit. It's not so far out like 10 years where it starts to feel like, man, this isn't even real. And again, 10 years out, that actually has quite a bit to do with our BHAG that's over here. And so in 5 years, we might be able to set up another 5-year plan that's going to help us get to that BHAG. Now, 5-year outcomes are 3 to 5 measurable conditions that must be true 5 years from now for the organization to consider its strategy successful. They describe the future state of the business, not the projects required to create it. So you're not going to see in here, here's exactly what we need to create. Rather, this is exactly what we want from an outcome standpoint, the business to look like 5 years from now. In this case, it could be 10 million in annual revenue with at least 15% net margin and also 90 days of operating cash. It could be at least 70% of our revenue generated by repeat customers and referral partners. As we read through some of these, we can imagine what are some of the projects that would need to be on the docket in order for us to achieve those. And that's when we actually get into the full strategy execution, which is going to come in these pages here that we're not going to get to on this video. Now, your 5-year strategic outcomes may include things like your revenue, profitability, cash reserves, customer retention, your market served, operational reliability, or things about your market advantage. It could be employee retention, leadership capacity, revenue per employee, or market position. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to avoid statements such as, we're going to be the best at something, unless best is somehow defined by measurable evidence. If you want to be the best rental company in your market, define what that is so that way you actually know that you've achieved it. A good question to ask as you're going through this is, what must be measurably true about the organization 5 years from now? Now, just because there's 5 of these doesn't mean that you need to fill all 5. Don't be afraid to set your sights high, but also don't get so out of control that you try to be everything and do everything. One of the worst things that you can do is stretch yourself so wide and so far that no strategy, no matter how good it is not going to get where it is that you're going. Now let's shift into strategic pillars. Now these are 3 to 5 major capabilities, commitments, or areas of strategic focus the organization must build or strengthen to achieve its 5-year outcomes. So in this sense, don't start looking at your pillars until you've set your outcomes. A pillar is a little bit broader and more durable than a project. It should be necessary to the outcomes, relevant across multiple years, and should be supported by several initiatives and measurable through 1 or more KPIs. The primary question it's going to ask is, what must this organization become exceptionally capable of doing? So if we want to build this, what capabilities are we going to need to get there? If you want 10 million in annual revenue, that might mean that we need to build a better hiring and training system, like what it says here, a talent engine. Now, you might have a major capability that covers 1 or more of your strategic outcomes. And in fact, a talent engine is probably going to help almost every single thing that you're seeing on here. Planner and venue ecosystem. If you want to get to that 10 million in annual revenue, you might have to figure out, how do we become the easiest premium rental partner for professionals to trust and reuse? How do we build a business that people are going to want to refer? How are we going to get these market advantages solidified in the business? So these are the strategic pillars. Strategic pillars help turn our strategic outcomes into what will eventually be our annual goals and projects. Because now that I know that this is my outcome that I want, I know that I need to build this. And in order to build this, here are the 3 to 5 high-level projects that I need to emphasize in my business over the next 3 to 5 years, so that way I can end up with this strategic outcome. So I'm explaining that a little bit more in depth so that way we have a firm understanding of why all of this matters. Next is our key performance indicators. Now, these are measurements showing whether strategy is actually working. Key performance indicators can be really difficult to find, implement, and use effectively. And part of the reason I say that is because everything has data to it now, to where everything's getting defined and we're not actually clearly identifying the key performance indicators. Now, ultimately, a KPI should be a limited number of quantifiable measures showing whether the strategy is working and whether the organization is moving toward its 5-year outcomes. I look at this in 2 different buckets. You're going to have your leading indicators and your lagging indicators. Leading indicators are measures that predict future results. such as time to employee competency, inventory utilization, proposal follow-up, qualified opportunities, or orders prepared on time. These things are going to tell us something about what's going to happen in the future. Lagging indicators are measures of results that have already occurred, such as revenue, net profit, customer retention, employee turnover, cash on hand, or on-time delivery. These are going to tell us what happened in the past. Any business should be looking at a combination of both. There are leading indicators that will tell us roughly where some of our lagging indicators may land. So if I have a leading indicator, which is leads that come into the business, I might be able to track the relationship between that leading indicator and what that looks like for my lagging indicator of revenue. When my leads go down, my revenue goes down. When my leads go up, my revenue goes up. So if I notice that my leads go down and then 2 to 4 weeks in the future is when my lagging indicator reflects that change, if I'm only looking at my lagging indicators, I'm looking in the past for something that I could have seen 2 to 4 weeks ahead of time. That's what makes this so incredibly cool. We want to be aware of the types of indicators in KPIs that we are adding onto a specific scorecard. And we want ones that are going to give us a clear snapshot of, is our strategy working? So if we are trying to build a talent engine, we might have a KPI that tells us what is our retention percentage. How are we supposed to get to a $10 million company with great margins where we're delivering all these orders on time and we're getting all of these great outcomes in the business 5 years in the future through a talent engine if our KPIs are actually showing that our retention is really terrible? We can't retain qualified employees because they don't want to work for us. So we're going to manage those KPIs as we're managing our projects that come from our strategic pillars. So that way we can get the desired outcomes. That's where the KPIs are leading into the projects, which are leading into the pillars, which lead into the outcomes. That's how all of this is connected. This is our high level overview of where we're going, some of the general things that we need to do to get there, and how we're going to indicate whether or not we're on track or off track. One other thing to note with this, KPIs, you're bound to probably not find the exact ones that you're looking for right at the beginning. I wouldn't be afraid of putting a bunch of numbers on this, tracking all of them to see what's really a leading indicator versus a lagging indicator. You also may find that there's an indicator that you didn't think was as integral to what it is that you're tracking, and it ends up showing you a piece of information that you otherwise didn't know that's really important to know. So I would suggest start out tracking a little bit of everything. You still want to be somewhat picky and not select literally everything that you can, but start tracking a wide breadth of numbers as it relates to the outcomes that you're looking for. So that's it for me. As I start working with a new client, this is one of the very first things that we're going to go through. It can take a little bit of time for us to figure this out. Again, this is not something that's going to happen in one day, probably not even 1 week. It can take months for us to really get a feel for exactly what this is going to look like as a business. While we don't want to go too urgently towards this and end up being completely off course, we do want to have a sense of urgency, if nothing else, because the market is always expecting some measure of urgency. Our competitors are always trying to figure out how they can beat us. The market is always moving in one direction. And if it's not towards you, it's away from you and towards something else. So we don't want to sit on this forever. I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough of this. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to help answer any questions you have. If you're not a current client of mine and you don't have this document, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to give out a copy so that way it can help you in your business. Best of luck, and I'll see you on the next one.